Woodsong by Gary Pualsen, Day 1. Out of Anchorage, just madness. There is no sleep the night before, 2 nights before, trying to get everything ready, no sleep or rest. The food is all shipped to 20 checkpoints across the state. The dogs are tucked into downtown Anchorage to the staging area on 4th Street where there is ridiculously no snow and they must bring it in. Because the snow is shallow, the sled cuts through to the bare asphalt, so there is no steering, no real control. The dogs are insane to run. We pull number 32, about the middle of a 70-team race, and the dogs get to stand and watch 31 teams go out ahead of them, out and down 4 blocks to turn sharp right and head out of the downtown section. 31 teams to watch, and then they take us into the chutes, and the dogs know it's our time. They lunge and tear and pull and scream until they count us down and we are released. Some new dogs, some old. Cookie is there, and Storm and Fonzie and Columbia and Yogi from the work team, and new dogs that I almost don't know yet. Forward. They blow out of the chute so hard that my arms are jerked nearly out of the sockets, and I cannot believe they are the same 15 dogs I have trained, have run so many times before. I am as nothing on the rear of the sled, nothing. We pound the 4 blocks in a heartbeat. I know we cannot make the turn, and we don't. The dogs sweep around, and there is a moment when there seems to be control, and then I roll. Over and over, but hang on to the sled somehow and slide out of downtown Anchorage on my face, dragging on the back of the sled like garbage. Only the sled and the dogs on the team matter. So little is known of other teams until much later, after the first 3 days. Some do not make it out of Anchorage. 1 musher breaks an arm, another a shoulder, 3, 5 blocks out, and they must scratch. And that is the worst. To scratch before the race, it is spoken of as a disease. I am a leper. I will scratch. It is the same. Many will, but nobody wants to. Everyone wants to finish. I regain control of the team, get back upright on the runners, and somehow get out of Anchorage. It is still not real, a dream. Finally out of the chutes, really starting to run the Iditarod. The dream, the run. And it's all phony. The show start in Anchorage is done for television, and to give Anchorage publicity. Teams can't truly go from Anchorage to Nome because the freeway system coming into Anchorage blocks the trail. The whole first start, the madness of it, the chutes, all of it has to be done over. 30 miles out of town is a suburb of Eagle River, where the dogs are put in trucks and taken 11 miles to Settlers Bay, where the true race starts. More chutes, more slamming and screaming and waiting for the front teams to leave. And again, madness. The dogs blow out of the starting chutes and scramble for speed, and this time it is into the bush, directly into the wilderness. But this sham start and restart has taken all day, and so the race truly starts at the end of the day, close to dark. With the darkness close comes chaos. The teams will not rest this first night. They are too excited and must be allowed to run until they settle in. So the darkness brings a particular insanity of passing teams and tangles and moose. My team stops dead in the dark, and I go up to investigate the reason and find my leader. Some run 2 leaders, but I favor one. A sweet but simple dog named Wilson, and I'm trying to get him to lead so I can save Cookie for later. And I find him with his head between the back legs of a moose, frozen with terror. The moose, a large cow, turns to look at me when my headlamp comes across her, then turns away. I do not have a gun, do not know what to do. "What the hell are you waiting for?" a voice demands suddenly from the rear as another team runs up on mine in the dark. "Why are you stopped?" "There's a moose?" I yell back lamely. "Well, kick it in the butt and get moving, or get out of the way." I try kicking the moose on the left flank, and to my amazement, she jumps and moves slowly off the trail so we can pass. Later in the race, I will try this again, and the second moose will jump on me instead of off the trail, making my life very interesting for about 5 seconds. And dawn. In the confusion, my leader gets lost and takes a wrong turn while I'm looking down into the sled bag, and we go 40-50 miles in the wrong direction. Up into some canyons where the trails get narrower and narrower until it finally just stops. I go up to the front of the team in the darkness and drag them around, realizing we're lost. My clothes have been ripped on tree limbs and my face is bleeding from cuts. And when I look back down the side of the mountain we have just climbed, I see 27 headlamps bobbing up the trail. 27 teams have taken our smell as the valid trail and are following us. 27 teams must be met head-on in the narrow brush and passed and told to turn around. It is a nightmare. The whole crazy night turning teams, stopping fights, yelling at dogs, and wading in armpit-deep snow until finally we are all back on the right trail, and at last, just before dawn, I can stand it no longer. 3 nights now without sleep, and I pull the team off into a narrow turnoff and sit on the sled to rest, to doze. I was not there 10 minutes, lying back with my eyes closed, when I heard footsteps in the snow. An older man, who was famous, stood next to me in the darkness and smiled down and said, "Would you like a chocolate chip cookie?" Wonderfully, incredibly, miraculously, he has somehow gotten 2 chocolate chip cookies through that mad night without breaking them. He handed me one, and I sat up and poured tea from my thermos into my cup and his, and we drank the tea and dunked the cookies and did not talk, but just sat. I looked at my watch and found it was exactly 24 hours since we were in the staging area in downtown Anchorage, waiting to get in the starting chute. It is the end of the first day. Day 2. At dawn, we break into the open from thick, dark forest and are treated to a spectacular sight. The sun coming over our right rear lights up the entire Alaskan range across our front. There are no clouds, and the mountains, McKinley on the right, tower over us in a dazzling white enormity, filling the sky while the sun warms our backs and the dogs settle into running. The madness of the night is gone. The front-end teams, the faster runners, have moved on, and we, the dogs and I, are left to get down to the business of running better than 1,000 miles. It is a strange thing to do. The dogs are magnificent. They are the true athletes of the Iditarod. The dogs continually cause wonder with their endurance, joy, and intelligence, and they have tremendous needs. They must be fed a snack every hour or so, and 3 or more hot meals a day. Their shoulders must be rubbed every hour, and they must be allowed to shake the lactic acid build up out of their joints each hour. And their feet. God, their feet. I am being pulled by 15 dogs, and that makes 60 feet to be taken care of, to be watched and rubbed with ointment and covered with booties if need be. So much time will be spent on my knees that I have sewn 1/2-inch foam pads into my pants at the knees to keep my legs from freezing when I kneel in the snow. And in this business of running, this whole business of getting started and settling down to take care of the dogs, and the tension and the speed of the race, I do not notice when we start climbing, beginning the long run up the mountains. We move through the day, up some frozen rivers and across the frozen lakes, and when it gets dark again, we come into the first of the 20 checkpoints. Noise and pandemonium, dog teams coming and going, judges and spectators all around, small planes landing on the ice and taking off. The dogs cannot rest because of the noise. I get my sacks of food, and we head up the river a bit to be alone, but they still do not rest. They sit and watch other teams coming and going, watching the planes taking off over us. Even in the dark, in the willows at the side of the river, it is crowded. A man with a team wanders in circles out in front of me, the dogs running around and around on the ice, jumping from one snowmobile trail to the next and circling back, confused by all the trails and the darkness. Everybody is confused. When it is clear the dogs will not rest, I hook up their tugs and we start off again. We luckily find the right trail, and as we leave the checkpoint, the man whose team was wandering follows us out. That night passes again in confusion. Teams pass us, we pass other teams. I stop to rest the dogs again, but they still will not sleep. Won't, indeed, for 2 more nights. So I let them run. The snow is unbelievably deep. When I stop them and run up alongside the team at one point to work on their feet, I mistakenly step off the trail and go in up to my armpits. I have to crawl out by grabbing at the dogs and using them for an anchor. And as my brain fries that second night, sleep deprivation catches me and I start hallucinating. We have been warned about that in briefings, along with frostbite, wind, whiteouts, wind, intense cold, and finally, wind. But nothing can prepare you for your first hallucinations in the race, because they are not dreams, not something from sleep or delirium. The intensity of the race, the focused drive of it, makes for a kind of exhaustion in the musher not found in training. The hallucinations seem to roar at you. They come while you are awake, come with your eyes open, and are completely real. There's a small bit of snow that spurts up from each dog's foot as they run, a little white jet, and that turns in my mind to a flame. I see my dogs all running in flame, their feet and their lower legs on fire. Terrified, I set the snow hook and run up to put the fire out, lean down to pat the flames out, and of course they disappear, are not there. But the vision comes again and again, until at last I somehow reconcile myself by thinking it is all right because the flames do not hurt the dogs. I'm amazed that they can run in liquid fire and do not feel pain or get injured. The hallucinations do not go away. Indeed, they get more complicated. Often I nearly get lost by going up rivers that aren't there, following lights that do not exist. And at one point, I have a man sitting on my sled. He is wearing a trench coat and a pair of horn-rimmed glasses and is holding a manila folder of official-looking papers. As I watch, he turns to look up at me. He is very distinct, and I can see the wrinkles in the fabric of his coat, my own reflection in his glasses. He turns to look at me and begins to speak in a low voice about federal educational grants. He is the most boring human I have ever met, as dull as thick mud. And he goes on until at last I yell at him to shut up. The dogs stop and look back at me, and of course, I am alone. It is only in the night when the hallucinations are bad, between about 11 and 4 in the morning, and I will not learn how to truly control them for another day and a half. The night drags on forever as the dogs keep trotting, and I reel in and out of half sleep on the back of the sled, but at long last it is dawn. There is cold now at dawn, deep cold. It is perhaps 50 cold, and I come alongside a musher whose teeth are chattering, a bad sign, when he tries to get a fire going. Cold, he says, the word a benediction. I nod from the closed tunnel of my parka hood and pull my team over to rest. They are at last ready to stop. It is the end of day 2.